So here we are beginning this process of hitting, and we're going to go over a lot of different things. I kind of want to make a video of showing basically everything that we need to do involved in just the hitting, from the approach to the footwork to the loading cycle to the arm swing. There's lots of different processes here, and I really want to kind of get rid of some of the myths and get into some of the scientific facts and basis of research that's really kind of been proven in some things. So that way we get a kind of a clearer picture of what we're doing here. So this is really about understanding and getting a clear image of what our bodies should be doing, how they should be working. It's not necessarily training or exactly how to do these kind of things. That's a different kind of subject. But understanding first is a really huge step into seeing what we're doing, and then being able to translate that and repeat that over a long time. So I really like to think of it as, it's a dynamic attack movement that's not only a process of athleticism and coordination, but also the ability to utilize the full spectrum of the artistic mind. So what I mean by the artistic mind is that each sport in general has very specific, unique techniques, and why we line up a certain way and why we do things certain directions, and it just works for that individual sport. So that's a human mind created thing, really. It's not just a natural process that we can do automatically. Like for example, running. I know running has integral techniques, and to make it more efficient and to be a master running is a very difficult process. Just like a marathon runner or a distance or a sprinter, that is a integral process to be the top. And I'm not discouraging or discrediting that. I'm just saying running is a natural kind of thing for human beings to start off with a baseline. Volleyball is a very integral, different kind of baseline sport where your basic movement to just play is passing, which passing, to use the forearms, to use everything, and to pass a ball is a very unnatural movement. So this process that we're going to use in hitting is going to be really step-by-step basis, and it happens so quickly. It happens within a 2-second time period. So we really want to be able to capture the technique and understand what's going on in that 2-second time period, because it looks, to the naked eye, it looks very daunting or very quick or a lot of motion, but which, if you break down simple processes, it really can be categorized and can be followed and repeated and taught and scouted. So another thing is really making a lot of these things for defensive purposes. We want to be able to pick up tendencies of hitters. We want to be able to understand what the hitter's doing and read that player, so we can make quick calculations mid-play and dig that hitter, pass that serve, all these little things. So it's really important to, from a defensive standpoint, to understand all these aspects, because you get to see the individualism of that hitter and what makes them so great or so, readable. And even the great players, just like a baseball pitcher and a batter, if you're not used to a baseball pitcher the first time you see them, it's very difficult. That's why hitters on the batting box, they kind of try to get their timing with that pitcher. They try to understand the mechanics, because the ball's coming so fast that you really have to understand how that pitcher looks, that release point, all these different things. So that can kind of go right into volleyball, same, and understanding that pitcher as the hitter. So as a defender, we kind of get that image of that hitter. So we're going to start off is kind of the mental mind state of these things is we must master a variety of important moments and movements here. Vertical jump, hip shoulder separation, and arm speed are all necessities. In other words, you need to jump to dunk a basketball, you need to throw a football in a a fastball in a baseball game, and thread a needle between defenders as a quarterback in football, all in sequence and all repeatable. So volleyball is kind of that unique sport where you're not only max jumping, but you're also throwing as fast as you can, and you're also precision guiding that arm motion. So it's a combination of a lot of sports, which actually, really drove me to get into the sport in the first place, because I was playing lots of different sports, and I always felt volleyball was a combination of so many different sports, and it was such an athletic movement, and it was such a cool team atmosphere, and such a contact of such a close speed quarters sport with so much technique that it kind of has still driven me today. So I'm going to really break down the 3 different patterns and steps that I categorize in each hitter. So each hitter really does follow these 3 separate categories in their process here. And one is the approach. So obviously the approach, we can take different amount of steps. It's not really about the steps. I'm talking about the amount of drive force that you're putting into it, how we're heel to toe contacting, how we're driving off our left leg. All these different things factor into our approach. And this is a very, very common and not unique. It's a very universal trait that all good and great volleyball players have. So you're going to see that this is where we create our energy, and it's going to be a translation of energy, but it's a very common, everyone does it the same. Everyone great, pretty much 99.9% of players do their drive steps and their approach the same. So we need to really understand what the process is if we're going to learn it, and also what their timing is if we're going to defend against it. So again, number 1 is your approach, and that is a universal, every player is pretty much the same. Now step 2 is your loading phase. This is the amount of time that we recoil. This is the amount of time that we load up. This is the amount of time that we do hip-shoulder separation, where we're loading into that swing and being loose and relaxed, and then engaging our arm into a different alignment so that our arm can rotate a certain way when we start to accelerate it. So step 2, loading phase, is a very unique process. It starts about when the shoulders are through their double arm lift and coming about waist high on the way up towards hitting. And we will go over this, of course, but everyone has their own kind of little special, unique loading phase. Everyone has a different way of rotating their shoulder. Everyone has a little bit different way of opening up. There's hundreds and hundreds of different players and hundreds of different types of little tweaks that people do. And this is what really fascinates me about volleyball hitting, is because all these little players, these take time. These are what you need to really scout and understand of how the hitter hits on the way up, how they load, how their arm swing comes around, the timing of their load. Some players have quick loads, some players have roundhouse loads, some players have bow and arrow loads, some players have wedge loads, some players have a natural arm break. You're going to see this, of course, in depth, but the introduction is that this is a unique process to you and to the player. So this is really, every player you're going to see, which is what I find fascinating, is really the little differences. It's kind of like their own little style, their flair. There is some similarities, and there is some coordination things that we want to do. We want to really engage our trunk and our twisting and our hip shoulder separation. But the actual arm and how it rotates around the ball and socket joint is a little special and a little unique, which I find, again, extremely fascinating in volleyball. We're going to go over that too. So the third one is the acceleration phase. And this, again, is common. This is not unique. This is around the world, the board. This is what we need to do to strike a volleyball and accelerate through after that loading phase. So again, the step close and the drive phase is a universal. The loading phase is unique, and then the acceleration phase is another universal process. So all volleyball players are following this universal sequencing. So we take approach is very standard, loading is unique, and then acceleration is standard. So I like to use this kind of symbol to in the loading acceleration phase. I like visual cues. So I use this symbol here. And what this means is when we jump, we're going to contract our legs, we're going to contract our hamstrings, we're going to contract our back, we're going to load up our body, and our whole body is going to be making this reverse C shape. So that's our loading phase. It's kind of a good way of visualizing things. And then we're going to snap into going forward after we start to accelerate. We're going to contact it as high as we can. We're going to snap forward, and being contacted at a high point, you're going to see we're going to straighten out that whole body. And then finally, we're going to accelerate forward through the ball and driving forward so our body and legs follow this normal C shape. And that's how we're going to drive through the ball. And these are all different step processes that we really need to be in control of. So I like to use that kind of image. You're going to see that a lot. And it's going to be kind of a universal process of symbol that I use. We're going to talk about some really big key terms here. I really want to give this video more of a knowledge based. Again, we're going to go over why volleyball or approaches look the way they do, why a volleyball player steps closes with the foot in front, why they hit on the way up, what's hang time, what exactly is shoulder hip separation, what is a kinetic chain. All these things I want to really get into in depth. And I've found lots of different articles and different videos with really respectable doctors and sports trainers that I've worked with or I've seen or I've heard about that are really top of their fields to give you the most accurate information I can find. One of these doctors is Dr. Tom House. He was a really high-level pitcher in the Major League Baseballs, and then he was Nolan Ryan's pitching coach with the Texas Rangers back in the 80s. And then he signed a big year deal with USC, University of Southern California, where he did research and pitching coaches, and then he turned into his whole own business of pitching with the top Major League Baseball pitchers and the top quarterbacks and top rotational athletes. So today he has a business working with all top rotational athletes. We're talking Tom Brady, Drew Brees, Nolan Ryan, Randy Johnson, Greg Maddux, 30 other NFL quarterbacks. We're talking serious research and science. And I had the pleasure of working 2 weeks with him about volleyball. I was one of his first volleyball trainees. I was coming in on he wanted to learn more about volleyball. We worked together to create kind of programs, and I got to learn a lot from his program. I worked with different NFL quarterbacks at the time. We were there with Major League Baseball pitchers. So it was a very opening up opportunity for me. And I want to share just some of the insights. We're going to see a little bit of him too in this video later. So we're going to go over first, we're really going to go through this process. We're going to first go over why we do what we do as volleyball players. Why does our hitting approach look the way it does? So I really want to get some myths and some kind of just odd theories out of the way and kind of give you some facts and some simple logic. I'm really into simple physics and simple logic on how to create this optimal, artwork of what volleyball hitting is. So I really want to give you as much information as I know. Volleyball is a very suggestive, opinionated sport. There's lots of coaches that teach passing differently. There's lots of coaches that teach blocking differently. There's lots of coaches that teach hitting your arm swing differently. This is from my 20, 21 years plus, ever since I was a little kid. I've been really researching these things and been obsessed with all kind of sports and arm swings and stuff like that in general. I was watching, Brazil and the Olympics and all these things on just repeat in my VCR when I was 12 years old. Literally, I wanted to be an NFL quarterback when I was a kid, probably 5 years old. I wanted to be an NFL quarterback. And volleyball, when I started playing it when I was 12, really just kind of changed my life a lot, just because of I just felt I just felt that it was just such a great combination of all sports, and it just was fascinating to me. So I still played baseball, basketball, volleyball, tennis, soccer, baseball, all these different sports. Up until I was in high school, I was a varsity football quarterback. I was a varsity basketball player, and I changed all those things. I dropped everything, semi-promising careers, I guess you could say, to go full-time with volleyball, because I was doing so much USA volleyball and training with John Spiraz, my youth and junior national team head coach, which he is now the Olympic coach, of course, for the men. And I got a lot of training from him early in my life. So when I was all through basically high school, John Spiraz was my USA coach. And I got the opportunity to train with the national team for many years, and different coaches and different aspects. So I've kind of pieced together this reference guide with all the kind of information that I've acquired and my research that I've done and my life experiences from playing 10 years plus overseas with all the different coaches there too. So again, this is my interpretation, and this is what I see with my eyes, and this is what I am trying to give. Again, this is not necessarily a teaching workout video. This is not like how to do these processes, because that's a whole other section, and that is the skill of coaching, really. That is how to train your players and how to get into that. But what we're really doing here is seeing what we want to look at, what we want to see in their approaches, what we want to do, what's the image going to look like. And also, again, even if we don't want to train our players or anything, this is for defensive purposes. Knowing what offensive players are doing can really train our defensive players blocking-wise, how to get in the right positions, where to line up, what their arm swing, how long it takes to load, how long it takes to attack, the different nuances of their range. So it really does come down to a lot of defense. If you just want to take this information and use it as a defender and make game plans and find something that you maybe, this player that you couldn't stop before, maybe you noticed after this video a couple little things that they do, and you're honed into their technique, and you can picture everything they do, and you can get into their mind a little bit. And so you can really understand their range, and then you can scout and make game plans around that. So that's one of my favorite things to do, really, is find that team, calculate all their players, see exactly what they do, and then make game plans for every situation and play that out. It's kind of this nice, cool chess match. That's what I love about coaching also. And each team is its brand new own puzzle, and it's really cool to try to get that technique down in your head of the other team, and then have them figure out more than they even know. So that then you make that defense, and they play into your hands, and you bait them into situations. So again, this is a huge part for defense understanding, and it's also cool if you want to learn a couple things on attack. Maybe you didn't notice that you were doing some things and prompt into. But again, this is not necessarily a workout video. That's a whole other, I can make, increasing your arm speed, increasing your jump, strength training, diet, mental, emotional mentalities. These are whole other factors that are later sections that we need to master too. But you want to make these as subconscious and get this technique into your game as much as possible, and make these moments and these motions subconscious as much as possible. Because the subconscious mind calculates things at over 150 million calculations per second. So and the conscious mind only can calculate about 14 things per second. So we're talking the difference between regulating, just our memory, or the body subconsciously being able to translate all these millions of motions smoothly. That's why when you're really in the game and you're really playing at your top peak, even every athlete, you can ask them when they're, you can see interviews when they're really, really, really at the top of their game, their peak. They maybe had an amazing match. Everything was just working. Everything was smooth. Everything was in rhythm. They weren't thinking too much. They were enjoying things because they had put in that huge process. They had taken the time to make these subconscious, and then they kind of let their body go through, and they were playing the game in their mind. So for example, if you can make this a step, this acceleration phase, your loading phase, and your hitting all in the same time, you can make that subconscious. Now that frees up my mind to see exactly where the block is, see exactly where the holes are, see what I want to do with the hands, and see, the ball too. A lot of players are so focused on their jumping, everything, it's throwing their kinetic sequence out of timing. It's throwing their vision out of timing. So we want to get these down as smooth as possible. That way we can actually play the game of volleyball. The top players in the world, they're not really thinking about their techniques, but they're thinking about where that ball is, what they're going to do with their hands, the other blocker, which blocker is a weaker blocker, which digger is a weaker blocker, what's my percentage of hitting to the left right now into the seam, what's my percentage of hitting this on the tee, which is the 10-foot line to sideline, should I hit a deep corner? It's almost like it's the game inside the game where you've mastered hitting. Hitting is not a difficult thing. Now you've taken it to the next level where you're playing the actual game of volleyball, and you're calculating the block, you're calculating the hitter, the digger, you're calculating everything. And plus, as a defender, you've also mastered your own defensive techniques, so you're in the right position, and now you're just really reading that hitter. If you're so worried about your footwork and not crossing over in your platform and your angle, then how are you going to actually read that hitter, where they're going to hit the ball? So anything in volleyball, anything in sports in general, we want to make things as subconscious as possible, and we want to make them as smooth and efficient and repeatable as process as possible. One of the last things is these steps. We're going to talk about certain terminology. You're going to hear hip-shoulder separation a lot. We're going to go over a lot of what hip-shoulder separation means. We're going to talk about our drive step, which is a huge push-off step into our step close. This is where we start our approach and how to get that technique going. We're going to hear drive step a lot. We're going to hear load a lot. We're going to hear kinetic sequencing a lot. We're going to go over these individually, all these terms, and really break down these terms so we can understand them. Also, I think it's very important to understand how the shoulder works. The shoulder is a very special, unique ball and socket joint that has an extreme range of motion. And again, every player kind of uses it differently. And it's a really, really, I wouldn't say finicky, but I would say it needs a lot of attention, a lot of care, the shoulder joint. It needs a lot of strengthening and how to process that, and range of motion and stretching, and it needs to be taken care of. It's something that I went through, and it's something that people just don't really understand how integral and how special the shoulder joint is, with how many different joints actually make up the process of the shoulder, the ball and socket itself with the labrum and the bone, how it actually lodges into place, and how it rotates, and how it can turn, and how it cannot be hurt, and how small and how fragile that ball and socket shoulder joint is. So we're going to go over a whole video section part of this on exactly the anatomy and the muscles in the shoulder, and you're going to see translated in that how quickly that actually affects our arm motion and how repeatable that arm motion is, right? So if you can play one game and your arm works perfectly, but you can't play 2 games and you can't play half of a season because your arm is done, then what was the point of that anyway? So we want to be repeatable, and we want to have a process of being able to hit it very hard, because this game requires strength and speed, but we want to also be injury less and we want to have some range with our hitting. That's the most important thing too, is range. We don't want to just be straightforward hitters. We want to have some diversity, and we want to have some manipulation of our body, and we want to be able to really focus on being deceptive as a hitter. So these steps must be performed in sequence for maximum effective output of body energy and power into the ball, and being able to repeat the effective energy over a repeated length of time. Effective, repeatable action over time plus mental competitiveness equals mastery of control. So what I mean by that when I say that is kind of a thing that I wouldn't say I invented it, but it's something that I come up with the term mastery of control. And again, there's the mental aspect, there's the physical aspect, there's the emotional aspect, there's the nutrition aspect. There's lots of different things that come into this play. And this particular video on hitting is to do with our approach, hitting, and the technique and knowledge of just the technique of hitting and understanding the body. So again, it's understanding the body and how we can control it. I'm going to go into some parts now here. We're going to break down them very individually and go through this process individually. I also want to show you how rotational athletes, which mean overhead rotational athletes, as in, throwers and all sports, football, quarterbacks, even golf, tennis, baseball, volleyball, water polo, all these things where we're overhead rotational athletes, they all correlate into a very similar process. It's quite interesting, the research done and the facts that get put in here. So again, volleyball is a little bit of a unique sport where we have to max jump. So this process takes a little bit more attention to detail here. So we're going to go ahead and start. We're going to look at some just kind of really easy clips. And we're going to get into some hits just to kind of show us what we're looking at here at first. So we're going to really get into the depth of them section by section. But at first, I want to really show you the best in the world and how they do it. And you're going to see that they all have this very common process. So first, we're going to start with Jiba. He's playing middle back here. He's going to be hitting a pipe. This is in the 2008 Olympics. But we're going to run through this and see his approach and see his hit and kind of just give you some key points of what it's going to look like. And then we're going to go into hundreds of different players and show you all of them. And then you can kind of make up your own mind about what my information is showing you. So I want to give you that information and show you here. So. All right, so there's a lot of key transition events here. So we're going to break this down first by what we talked about, the approach. So this process here is the approach. We're going to start with this every single time. It can be a 4-step, it can be a 5-step. Even I've shown some clips where they dig middle back and they do like a 15-step approach, but really the 3 steps is the drive. So left, so right, and then left here. This is where we push off as a right-hander with our left step. And this is where we're really loading up our double arm lift and getting ready to launch and jump. So this is the universal process. This is the process that we're talking about into our step close here, our drive step. So when I say drive step, this is our drive step. In the track and field world and in the Olympic world, it's called a penultimate stride. It's the second to last stride, which means that it's basically the second to last push off. It's a kind of a universal term coined in the track and field world, but I'm going to use that as our drive step in the volleyball world here. So we're doing a lot of energy, we're forcing a lot of energy down, we're using the ground as energy boost, and right about here is where we start our loading phase. So when I said our arm lifts comes from here right to there, when it's coming to the side of our hips, when our arms get to about right here, this is when we become a unique player and load differently. You can see Gustavo here has a nice bent arm load and brings it to the side, opened up. Even the left hand is kind of unique to some players. Jiba here, same thing, nice arm curl break. And then opens up nice and easy. So this is our loading phase from here, right about here. This is where we start our unique. Everybody from here to here does the same. From here to here, this is a universal technique. This is step one. This is what I was talking about. From here, now, to here, that is our loading phase to here. So from here to here, that's our loading phase. That's how this one is unique to each little person, and it's going to be a little bit different for each person. But the key aspect of what we want is that hip-shoulder separation. And when we talk about hip-shoulder separation, we talk about the hips facing one way and the shoulders facing the other way to create a lot of elastic energy in the abs, keeping the head quiet and keeping our shoulders really parallel to our hips, and then snapping back that kinetic chain. So when I talk about kinetic chain, we're talking about energy from here, translating energy into our arms, into our legs, translating now into our hips, and then following through and translating into our arms and into our swing. So the arm is the last to go, but it's stored up all this energy as a process. So it's a kinetic chain of events to snap on this ball and produce a lot more energy than you would just by muscling through it. We're using gravity, momentum, physics, all these different things to propel the ball faster. So we want to be right here. This is the reverse C that I talked about. This is a full body bow and arrow. And this is where our loading phase ends. Our loading phase ends when our arm is as back as far as possible. Our right hitting arm, if we're right-handed, our elbow is back. And we're in this coil C shape, reverse C shape. Our acceleration phase is a two-step process of getting straight, opening up the bow, letting the arrow fly, and then contracting that upper body. As you can see how straight up and down and reaching he is, a little bit, the ball's a little bit forward in it. But then the last phase of our acceleration phase is the attacking phase, where our body recoils forward and produces that forward energy. So again here, here is our loading phase. Up, you can see how the arm is a unique kind of thing. And here, that's our reverse C right here. This is our really good, that's where our loading phase ends. And here is the acceleration phase starting now, where the elbow's back as far as possible. And in this peak, we can't go back any further. So the acceleration phase begins once we can't go back any further. And you can see from this angle, when we do attack, we're getting that ball a little bit in front. And then when we do attack here, it's forward. And also the process of, we're going to eliminate some things about myths again, about follow through and wrist snap, and how that's really a process of this whole energy driving. We don't really want to think about wrist snap so much, and we don't want to think about follow through so much. We want to let these drive through our technique, and we want to. There's some controversy there. A lot of coaches say, slam the door or put your hand in your pocket, which are okay for starters, for beginners. These can be a good tool when you're first starting out to kind of understand what this chain of events goes through. But the older you get, the more advanced you get, there's a whole other type of things that we need to be focusing on, and you will naturally follow through to the right or to the left, and you will naturally curve your hand over the ball through this acceleration phase if you are lining everything up, because you're creating so much energy that you can't help but do this. You literally can't help follow through, not stop your arm, drive your arm through, and you can not help snapping your wrist over the ball because of how much G-force and energy you are producing. So again, those are kind of key terms to use as beginners, but we're going to see how this process works and why I say what I say. So for a middle, we can see a middle attack here. Big step close, you can see. We're going to see our middle. We're going to take it step by step. Left off this step here, you can see how far of a drive step he's doing. And then how quick of a load here, how back this is, how he's straightening up, how he's following through. Here's Boscovich. We're going to go over female and male players, and we're going to go over lefties and righties. So I really want to hit every aspect, and I want to see almost every example of the top players from, the last 15 years. Basically, I want to give you a look at how this process really hasn't changed a whole lot. The speed of the game has changed, the arm swings and the loading phases have been more efficient. So again, here we go. And you can kind of already see her step close as now as a lefty is off this right foot. How this stride, how this relaxation. We're going to go over this again, but this is just a good overview first. And you can see how she kind of makes an X with her arms load. It's a little bit different. But here again, we're talking about hip-shoulder separation. This is the maximum hip-shoulder separation. So again, this is that C, reverse C. Now this is our loading phase is finished because the arm is at its peak back here and our spine is as far as we can go back. Now we're accelerating. This is where our acceleration phase comes in through. Again, this is our contact point, a nice high straight line, and the follow acceleration follow through phase. Here's Hawk. She's another great player for the Coffee Bank here. And again, these processes look so fast, but if you break them down and you slow them down, we're going to understand how similar this process is. So, big step off of this foot, heel to toe, driving up with the arms, same kind of thing. Load, you can see this load is a lot different, how she takes it out to the side. You can see it's clearly to the side. But there, from this view, you can see this shape perfectly. She's really at her peak back. And now the acceleration phase starts there. So from here to there is acceleration phase. And you can see straight line, hit, follow through. Again, this is the acceleration phase, but it's kind of the recoil. Again, the middle, big step close, left foot in front, arms up. You can see this hand goes directly up, a little bit of a different load, and then attack through. So I really want you to get into, we're going to dive into the different aspects here. We're going to go into why as volleyball players we do these things, why it looks like this, why don't we jump 2 feet together, why don't we jump off 1 foot always, Why don't we have our fist closed when we hit? All these questions. So I want to go over all these questions. We're gonna address everything here, and also the myths, again, debunking some of these kind of things, these false narratives, like, for example, hang time. You want to be able to hit on your way up or manipulate your body while hitting, but there is no such thing as jumping, hanging, and then falling. Everything we do is in a process of an elliptical. So I have some other videos that are going to be in this, other sections that are going to really address this kind of thing. So we want to eliminate as much untrue things scientifically as we can, and then we're going to get a full picture of what we're doing. Again, we're going to go through this here. We're going to see another attack. Another pretty good hit by Boscovich here. So we have an outside attack, a nice dig, and how quickly we get into this step, close, jump, load, and see where we're hitting. And if I was just worried about, as a hitter, if I was just thinking, about my technique and getting hit, maybe I would hit into this block and I wouldn't see this block. But you can clearly see now that she's got this contact, she sees the hole, she sees the spot, and now she's really playing the actual game of volleyball. And she knows the defender's here, so she hits it through this block at the defender's feet so they can't dig it. So we hit here and try to make them move. We don't want to hit in the middle of them here. So she's doing two things. She's really seeing this block. She's hitting around it, and then she's also knowing where the back row defender is, and she's hitting at the legs, at the bottom feet, trying to make them move with power. So this is really playing the game of volleyball. And we got to get these techniques, and we got to understand these techniques subconsciously. We're going to go through a couple also things about heel to toe contact, where we're jumping, why we're jumping, and then again, the anatomy of that shoulder, why this shoulder can rotate and do what it does. So it's a lot of different interesting things here. And it's also a very dynamic, fun experience, I think. So it's an interesting little journey here. And again, it follows a very strict process. And we're going to look at different sports and how they relate. And we're going to look at what we do and why we do it. So on to the next part is why we do as volleyball players what we do here.